Hi, I'm David Mania, the Minister of Finance and Economic Opportunities in the Western Cape, and I'd like to welcome you all to this Cape Health Tech webinar. The health technology sector is an important sector for us in the Western Cape because it currently contributes an estimated 1.7 billion rand to the provincial economy and creates approximately 2,500 full-time jobs in the Western Cape. Around 40% of the top 10 Western Cape export markets for medical technology are in Africa, while Europe, the United States, and the United Kingdom are the top export markets for pharmaceuticals. And so it's no wonder that the Western Cape boasts a number of highly innovative digi-health companies. We have the overwhelming evidence that Cape Town is Africa's leading tech capital. Now we need to jointly tell the world. And it's for this reason that just last week we launched a unified tech brand for Cape Town and the Western Cape, officially positioning Cape Town and the Western Cape as Africa's tech capital. The initiative seeks to clearly represent the values, skills, talent, innovation, and lifestyle offered by the tech ecosystem of Cape Town and the Western Cape, and of course to showcase Cape Town as Africa's tech capital. This will attract international investment and funding, reinforce our brand to stimulate exports of our tech products and services, stimulate uptake of tech in our local industries, and of course raise awareness of the tech career opportunities for young people in the Western Cape. We invite the medical tech sector to join this collective and get the logo. For more information, visit westgrow.co.za. I thank you.
This past year has forced every business, sector, and individual to reimagine how they operate. So we're excited to welcome you to the first virtual version of Cape Health Tech Week. South Africa's pharma and medical device sectors are the largest and most advanced in sub-Saharan Africa, with pharmaceutical and medical device sales more than doubling in the last 10 years to reach 48 billion rand and 19 billion rand in 2019, respectively. The pharmaceuticals market in Africa is expected to grow to $45 billion in 2020 and more than 160 billion by 2024. This would represent a compound annual growth rate of more than 20%. In 2016, the Western Cape had 43 health technology firms, with 72% focused on medical technology and the remaining balance focused on pharma biologicals. It's no wonder that here, in the tip of Africa, the future of medical innovation is not only being imagined, it's also being created. And now COVID-19 has catapulted the tech sector, particularly the medical tech sector, to innovate more rapidly than ever before. With Cape Town already celebrated as Africa's tech capital, enabled by a dynamic ecosystem, we believe there's a real opportunity for innovation and future growth.
Hello and welcome to the fourth and final day of Cape Health Tech Business Week Virtual. In this section, our focus is on innovation, and we'll be discussing the fast-changing landscape of health technology. We're joined today by two industry experts, Claudina, who is the Director of Health and Innovation at the Department of Science and Innovation, as well as Walter, who is the Chief Director and Innovation Officer at Deloitte. Walter's just running a few minutes late, but Claudina will be presenting first and then Walter. And together they will be providing an overview of innovation in the country today. Just a reminder for our viewers, if you have any questions during the session, please type them into the dedicated Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and not into the chat. And we will answer them at the end of the presentations. So I'm going to begin by introducing our first speaker for the session, Claudina Lutz. Claudina is the Director for Health and Innovation at the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa, and as such is responsible for the implementation of health components of the bioeconomy strategy for South Africa, and concentrates on enabling research and innovation that leads to the discovery of new drug and treatment regimes, the development of new vaccines, and new robust diagnostics, as well as the development of medical devices. Claudina was instrumental in the creation of the Strategic Health Innovation Partnership Initiative at the South African Medical Research Council. She is also a member of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19. Claudina, I'm going to bring up your slides now, and then it's over to you.
Thank you for that. I'm not always sure if it's a good thing to mention I was on the Mac, but anyway. Next slide. So one of the most important drivers of where we are going with regard to health technology is actually the whole notion around the fourth industrial revolution, or as the Chinese call it, the next industrial revolution. They say from a Chinese perspective, there is definitely more than 3 that has happened already. So when you start looking at this, and even if you look at what's happening now with the COVID crisis, you will see there's certain familiar things that came up. Disruption to jobs and skills, inequality, security and conflict, business disruption, fusion of technologies, ethics and identity. If you start looking at what is happening, there's more and more a self-consciousness of people on who they are and what they want from life. And when you start looking at health, the same kind of activities is actually driving health as well. Next slide. So up to this point, we have been concentrating on the development of new improved drugs, the vaccines, biologics, diagnostic medical devices, also strengthening clinical research and development, and establishing pharmaceutical manufacturing. That has not changed. We're still going to concentrate on what is necessary to enable this kind of environment. But within that, we need to look from a different perspective on how we're actually going to do it. Next slide. So when you start looking at what is driving health innovation globally now, what are the main things that we need to start looking on? The first thing is the unsustainable rise of cost. We cannot afford it anymore. So we need to find smart ways of doing business. How do you bring good healthcare still to the people, but at a reduced cost, or something that's sustainable? The digitization of health and healthcare is providing a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. And if you look at the patient awareness that comes with it, and to what extent you can utilize that patient awareness by giving them more access and more control of their health and treatment, it is one of the benefits that we need to take further. And what is with the rapid evolution of science and medicine and the convergence of your technologies, nanotechnology, biotechnology, the information technologies, and then also your cognitive sciences, we need to start thinking on how do we actually then address this, use this energy that's sitting in this convergence and actually to drive new innovations as such. Next slide. So when you start looking at the main driver is the things that's coming out, your artificial intelligence, your 3D printing, your targeted drug delivery system, but precision medicine, the human machine interaction, the wearables that we're looking at. And it's not only sort of your Fitbits, but other wearables that will enhance a patient's health as such. Then at the same time, your robotics, and how do you, even your nanorobots, how will you utilize that kind of developments? And at the same time, it creates an enormous amount of information. And how do we use that information in an ethical way in order to make it sure that the public benefits from it? One of the things that we have to be very careful of is because of the public, the POPI Act, where we have to protect a person's personal information. And within even health research, you have to be very careful and make the necessary adjustments to ensure that the patient's information stays that person's information, and they need to give the permissions on what to do it, and not to put in unethical behavior by sort of asking for blanket permission to use your blood samples and things for research, and you do not specify exactly what are you going to use that research for. So with all these new technologies, we have to be very careful, and we have to be very conscious of the ethical behavior, and not to give in to there's a lot of pressure from big companies who said, yeah, just give us your samples or give us your data. We will give you this and this in exchange. And if you start looking at, is it really beneficial for you? Is it really beneficial for the country? When you start giving out this information, because information is actually nowadays the main goal that they are trying to actually going into mine that and to see to what extent that can help. With South Africa being such a diverse country, not only our biodiversity in nature, but also the biodiversity in our people, we are very much a target for a number of pharmaceutical companies that needs to get access to our genomes and to see what actually is, they can learn from that without making real provision for plowing back the information back into the country. Next slide. So when you start looking at what are the issues in global healthcare, and this most probably will overlap with our next speaker as well. But things is, yes, we have to make it financial sustainable. There's a lot of talk about the national health insurance, but we have to ensure that if we are going forward with universal healthcare, national health insurance, that we do not go backwards in the services that is being offered, but that we actually offer services in a smarter way that will enhance the patient's experience and at the same time address the issues around service delivery as such. So we have to adapt to your consumer needs, demands, and expectations. A lot of you will be on Discovery Health, and you know that how you actually have to give permissions and the kind of offerings that also come through that, and in making you more aware of your health and what is available for you within that. How do we take that and actually make it more accessible then to the wider population as such? But most people has got smartphones or access to smartphones. So one of the biggest challenges for your medical practitioners is, yes, by the time they prescribed or tell something, this and this is what's wrong with that person, the next thing is the person go onto Google, and then Google Doctor is giving them information. And there's such a lot of misinformation as well that provides extra challenges to your medical practitioners on how to then wade through this, what they call now the infodemic of information, and make sure that the correct information is actually available. We need to look at new healthcare delivery models. How do you bring in e-health, telemedicine, those kind of activities to ensure that high quality care is still given, but that you utilize your trained medical personnel optimally? Then one of the main things is to look at your digital information and the transformation that comes with it. And how do you actually use things such as artificial intelligence and machine learning to provide backup for the medical practitioners, to be basically also research assistants to researchers. And if you look at the Watson project from IBM, to what extent that is actually assisting on discovering new chemical entities and so on, and to what extent are you able to tap into this and make sure that you're not leaving behind as a researcher or as a developer. But with all of that is the regulatory compliance and cybersecurity, and to what extent have we got systems into place that can protect you and also make sure that you actually are fulfilling all the regulatory requirements as such. COVID-19 has taught us a number of lessons apart from wearing your mask and stay apart. It is also on what are the gaps within our systems, that regulatory systems that we need to address quickly, and how do we actually are able to go around that. And through all of this, it's essential that, yes, a lot of this is being done by computers and so on, but in the end, there's still the human interface. There's still the person that's sitting there who's actually doing a lot of the thinking work and the strategic work and the interaction with one another. And how do we actually find the top talent for that? And what are the steps that's needed to ensure that those people have the necessary opportunities to broaden their scope of knowledge and abilities to what they can do. Next slide. So from the Department of Science and Innovation, we are going to concentrate on 3 new areas, and all of them is looking from the perspective of a better health for all, universal health care, and what can we do within that. So the 3 main things is new treatment and prevention technologies, very much starting to look at your immunotherapies, your biologics, but within that, your smart delivery systems, using liposomes or using other nano delivery systems, combined with feedback via some other electronics. And one of the main things is, if you look at the advances within the genomic field and how you can bring that back into diagnostics that can be utilized to provide a better diagnosis, and then also at the same time assist with the management of the treatment or the drug that has been given to a person. And how do you bring all of this together and still keep the uniqueness of a person within all of that? So we're going to also concentrate on digital health and how to take the information generated through the genome and make that personalized. How, to what extent can we miniaturize the diagnostic tools so that it is still able to provide you with the right diagnosis, but it can be used in a resource poor setting? So you eventually want to have the equivalent of a PCR machine in a clinic in Mpumalanga where there's not electricity. So what are the things that you need to look at in order to still be able to use the information that's been generated, but still make sure that it is actually providing you the right diagnosis as such? And then the main thing that we are going to concentrate is specifically on precision medicine, and that's going back to your diagnostic tools. But eventually it will also be within your cancers. How do we design treatments that is specific for you? But at the same time, it must not cost you 5 million rand or whatever, but it's at a cost that your it can be made available within the wider public. One of the things that, for example, that we've done, that we've funded, is the development of the breast cancer test, BRCA test, where we actually assisted one of the researchers to utilize the information gathered from African patients to make sure that the BRCA test that was not developed here, but it was adapted then to specific South African populations. And now they can use it and they can actually determine already, for example, if a woman has got breast cancer, will she be a good candidate for Herceptin or not? So by using that test, you are able to assist your medical aid or your healthcare provider by making a clever choice. It's no use wasting money of a specific treatment on somebody because that person's genetic setup is as such that it will not be beneficial for that person. So the first one we did, it was the about breast cancer, but we're now looking at other cancers as well, looking at your cardiovascular diseases and so on. And it now developed into a whole process around your pharmacogenetics, where we start looking at, is a specific drug actually appropriate for a specific population, and to start looking at changes then in your normal way of prescribing drugs, and actually start suggesting different ways or different drug regimes and treatment regimes to actually be put into place. Next slide. So yes, I spoke already about the whole genomic and precision medicine. By putting the ability in South Africa to do actually a whole genome sequencing, and we've got a very strong next generation sequencing abilities and platforms in South Africa, we are able to do those kind of things. We can play with the main players in the world on around the genomic research that's happening. So we are playing a very important part in the world around this, and to ensure that African populations are actually being included in your international studies as such. Next slide. Then I spoke about the Internet of Medical Things. So the main thing around that is your enhanced patient experience, your improved drug management, decreasing of costs, improved diagnostics and treatment, your disease management, and remote monitoring. So all of that is actually outcomes that you can, if you design your technology as such, that will enhance the healthcare delivery. And you have to be sort of really have the latest tools within the environment in order to take it forward. So do not think you can just sort of develop another app. For example, one of the things that we've been doing, we've been working with the National Department of Health to actually develop a app architecture platform where a lot of people are designing all kinds of apps, but then there's certain normative standards that needs to be in place. And we've designed now the architectural platform for the Department of Health that if an app conforms to certain standards and is willing to be part of the management system that and feedback of management information back to the Department of Health, then that app will be uploaded onto the app store for the Department of Health, and there's certain levels of access then that people can have to it. It's either for nurses or for doctors or for the general public, but those apps will be sort of get the tick of Department of Health. It's approved. It is correct, and it will. They've got the confidence in it being used as such. So that will also then assist the healthcare workers to know which apps provides the correct adapted South African information, and also speak to our own way of doing things. And then that will go forward. So similarly, we need to look at all of those kind of things and how do we actually bring it back then to enhance the patient's experience, but at the same time provide healthcare as such. Next. So I already spoke about your artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data. So one of the things that we're looking at is in big data, what does it take to provide the clouds that's needed for the big data? How do you safeguard your information? How do you make access available for that information? And with it, what kind of computer farms do you need, server farms do you need in order to drive it? Who's a safe cloud provider and things like that? And there's a lot of work that's going on that in order to safeguard the information as generated, but at the same time, looking at then ways of artificial intelligence and how we can actually then mine the information and take it forward. What is very interesting, one of the projects we're working on is actually taking the radio astronomy experts, people who's got the PhDs in astrophysics, and how do you actually bring them then in to look at healthcare? Because it's all about seeing patterns. It doesn't matter what, but you need to look at what kind of patterns are you picking up from the data, and then to have the specific biomedical expert working with that, then to interpret the data that they, or the pattern that they've actually seen. And then blockchain is with us, and we need to see to what extent we can use the abilities of blockchain then to look at your patient records and to ensure or the procurement of medicine, and how do we utilize those technologies in developing systems that can enhance the healthcare delivery as such. And then your training for doctors and nurses or patients, and to what extent we are actually using your virtual or augmented reality then to actually provide videos or training material then in order to make it more accessible and wider available as such. Next slide. Then, yeah, then the other issues that we need to start looking at is robotics. To what extent are we using robotics to perform standardized procedures as such? And the main interesting thing is actually 3D printing that is becoming more and more integrated in what we are doing. So not only sort of in your medical device or prosthesis field as such, not only printing new shoulders or things or new jawbone and things like that, but starting to look at printing of drugs. And that is sort of one of the interesting things is now how to actually combine it with a person's genetic material, then finally just print the drug for that person, what he or she will need. And that is sort of one of the very exciting fields going forward. And then there's the utilizing of things such as drones. And how do we make sure we actually fully utilize it? But that has got a lot of medical legal aspects to it. And that still needs to be sorted out, apart from the civil aviation issues that needs to be sorted out. But the opportunities that there are within the combination of drones with your medical records or your pharmacy records and things like that, to bring healthcare to people as such. Next. Yeah, and that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudina. I should probably have mentioned at the beginning that you are actually joining us from a recent knee surgery operation. So yeah, we really appreciate you finding the time in between your recovery to actually join us on this webinar. And I mean, thank you for that great look into the future. Or we say the future, but actually a lot of these things are currently taking place, as you pointed out. And I think everybody will agree that the COVID-19 pandemic has sparked an increased interest in healthcare globally. And obviously this has had an effect on the pace of medical innovation. Now to talk a little bit more on this subject, I would like to introduce our second speaker of the session, Walter. Leading Deloitte's digital innovation and venturing portfolios, Walter is a member of the firm's Global Innovation Executive, the former founder of Monitor Deloitte and the leader of Deloitte Digital in the region. A corporate entrepreneur with extensive experience in venturing and commercializing businesses across a number of industries, Walter works with the CEOs of leading organizations to scale innovation and impactful technology concepts into high-growth, sustainable entities. Over to you, Walter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kendra. And Claudina, it's always great listening to your views and conversations. It's a hell of a privilege to have sat in on that. I'm going to put up my screen in a second, and then we'll take it from there. Let's see if it pops up. It's always challenging with two screens. I see it's gone onto my second screen over here. Just give me a second. Apologies for that. So here's the challenge of the second screen.
No problem.
So while I'm busy just calling it up, I don't know why it's not. There we go. right, so you should have the screen up now on your side. Apologies for that. It always gets tricky. You know, I'm always jumping between Zoom and Blue Jeans and Teams, etc., and all of the settings are always different. So, I mean, what I'm going to, maybe before I get into it, you know, it's always, I always enjoy listening to Glaudina and her views, and she's so insightful and in the detail all the time. There was one thing I would maybe we should have a debate on, and perhaps I disagree slightly on, and that's the 10-year view, the 10-year perspective. I don't think we've got 10 years to make some of these moves. You know, what we've seen over the last 8 months is an aggressive acceleration towards endpoints. So, you know, across a variety of industries, the time horizons to trigger new initiatives that leverage digital and exponential technologies have almost been halved, and in some instances reduced by 4/5 of the time it takes to bring those initiatives forward, and also to implement initiatives. I think being in a crisis for the last couple of months, and you know, this whole thing being a survival imperative, has really gotten executives and organizations to become laser focused on what needs to happen. And typically all the emotive debates that we have around not wanting to do things or delaying certain things have been thrown out the window. We've had to act quickly in order to survive. So I think our 10-year views, we need to go revisit those 10-year views and perhaps think about how we bring them forward, because I guarantee you, your competitors are doing exactly the same. Everyone is trying to bring things forward. And so a philosophy that I operate by is quick isn't quick enough at the moment. We need to certainly operate at a phenomenal speed. So I'm gonna take you through. I'm going to take this conversation one level up above healthcare. Now, I've been in healthcare for over a decade and a half, but I think what's important, and certainly what's resonating with a lot of organizations I'm speaking to, is, so how do we, you know, what is it that we need to do to be successful in this digital economy? And Glaudina gave you a lot of examples of, you know, practical stuff that's playing out in healthcare. And I do think healthcare is a very complicated market, probably one of the most complicated markets, because we're in a matrix. We're talking about prevention, we're talking about healthcare, and we're talking about post-care. You know, then we're talking about healthcare providers, healthcare funders, patients, manufacturers of drugs, and manufacturers of equipment. And each individual, while we call ourselves healthcare, we pull in different directions. So I want to bring it back to how can we think about how we navigate in this environment. So at the bottom of the screen, you've got my, you know, if you take out your camera, phone camera, and you just hover it over those QR codes, you'll get my contact details if you want to stay in touch. The blue QR code will take you to my LinkedIn profile, where some of the stuff I referred to is posted, and the black one is just my personal contact details if you've got some questions and I'm unable to cover them before we progress. A little bit bigger for those of you that have got phones that struggle to focus. I'll keep it there for 5 seconds and then we'll move straight into it. So if I talk about the digital economy, this is the image that we typically have. It's this exponential curve of technology, and we call it the disruptive curve, etc. I'd like us to think about it differently. Don't see that curve, that exponential curve of digital progression, as anything disruptive. It's only disruptive for organizations that are unable to unlock the dividends of this digital economy. You know, the progression of digital is happening because patients, consumers, organizations are adopting it. And once they've adopted it, it's very difficult to go back to old ways. And typically how it plays out is we see the digitization of businesses, as I mentioned, and then it plays out in the 3 of the 6 popular Ds: dematerialization, demonetization, and democratization. So dematerialization would be something along the lines of, you know, these are examples of healthcare dematerialization, where we've eliminated the infrastructure or our limitations linked to a geographic location to do business. So, you know, Zipline has dematerialized healthcare logistics. This is a business that operates across Africa. Mercy Virtual is a dematerialized a dematerialized hospital, and people call it, you know, anecdotally a phone hospital. And if you go online and you have a look at Mercy Virtual, they've established a facility that only houses healthcare professionals, and these healthcare professionals are connected to people around the US, and providing them with, you know, providing them and their doctors with care remotely. And if you go onto their website, you can actually do a 360 tour of their facility. It's quite remarkable. So this is examples of dematerialization. And then you've got companies like Biofab that have dematerialized, you know, device and tissue procurement. You know, and Glaudina mentioned it in terms of 3D printing. It's changed the approach. We also see the democratization of business, and in healthcare, democratization would suggest that we use data differently, either way, the way we source data or the way we distribute and use the data. And there's plenty of examples of companies that have demonetized data. And a South African company by the name of IT.next has essentially helped organizations, healthcare, non-healthcare organizations, to surface the data that exists inside their organization. Companies like Health Gorilla, I think they're owned by Apple, they're still owned by Apple, if I'm not mistaken, are using and disseminating data in different ways to unlock value for the healthcare professional. If you look at all these examples of democratization, it's important to highlight that the organizations that I've worked with will all tell me they use 100% of the data that's available to them. But in reality, we're only accessing about 8 to 12% of the data our organizations and our patients and our customers and value chains are generating. Our buildings generate data, our patients generate data, our supply chain generates data. It's just blind to us. We're unable to do anything with that data. So if I go back to the D's, so in healthcare, very clear examples of dematerialization, very good examples of democratization of data, as I mentioned. Demonetization is still a very difficult thing. We don't see a lot of it in healthcare. And that would suggest that the business model of healthcare changes, where we move away from a model where I give you something and you pay me for it. Demonetization would suggest, we're moving to value-based type models that are scalable and sustainable, subscription-based models, and so on. Now, normally when I highlight these examples of dematerialization, demonetization, and democratization, someone will always say to me, yeah, but you have to be a tech company to do these things. And certainly tech companies do this very easily, but it's less about the tech. And this is the point I want to emphasize with you on this call. It's less about the tech and more about the mindset of the leaders of that organization. And let me give you an example. It's not in healthcare, but in this example, it's a couple of years ago, the Spanish government levies a tax on theater tickets. It was a tax of about 15% on theater tickets. So typically comedy clubs start going out of business. Now, we're smart people on this call that we run large businesses. If we had to solve this problem, if we put ourselves into the room and we had to solve this problem, we would have approached this problem the same way in which we approach problems the way we've been trained. So if there's an additional 15% tax, we'd consider charging our customers 15% more. We probably would have tried to reduce costs, consolidate shows, reduce the number of outlets we have, etc. This is how we've been trained. This is the paradigm within which we operate. This organization did something very differently. They said, you know what, we're going to change the business model for a comedy club, and we're going, you can come to our show for free, no cost, no cover charge. But instead, we're going to charge you every time you laugh. And so they put these iPads on the back of every seat, these tablets that recognized a smile through biometrics. And every time someone laughed during the show, they got charged 50 euro cents for that laugh, right? And the net effect of this is that they were sold out all the time, and they're making more money than ever before. And so the thing that I want to highlight here is not to go down into the technology, but highlight the fact that the solution lay in the leadership's mind. It wasn't about the technology. It was about breaking free from how we've been trained to think about the constraints of business models, our industry, our organization, to think without constraints, to think about that unreasonable value proposition we want to create, and then make it possible, sustainable, and affordable with the technology. I'm seeing too often organizations are leading with the technology conversation. We have AI, how do we use it? And then they invest into AI and they try to retrofit it into the organizations, and then they complain there's no return on investment, or I've got 3D printing as a good example, or IoT and so on. So the thing that I'm going to emphasize over and over is that what we need is to lead the digital shifts, the digital dynamic we're in, with the business through a business lens, a business imperative. But in order to be successful, we've got to change how we think and the leadership mindset that we embrace as leaders. If we try to do things the old way, I guarantee you're going to get the same old successes. And let me unpack this a little bit more for you. So I want to take it further, that when we talk about digital, and I'm emphasizing the point that it's not just about the technology, we need to break away from that thought process. Digital is changing the physical world, it's changing the biological world, it's changing the chemical world, and it's certainly changing how we view information, and Gladina touched on that. But most importantly, in practical terms, it's changing how we live, work, and communicate. And any debates we've been having about that have gone out the window in the last 8 months. It's also going to change our industries. It will change our economies. It has to, or at least our economies need to change in order to remain relevant. And I think another positive thing it will change the way in which we bring about social change, because through digital, we can really embrace that fourth sector thinking, where we can, focus on impact, but remain prioritized around profit and so on. And we can also reach into communities that we were unable to do so before, and measure and see the impact that we're making in these communities. So again, I'm going to come back to this point. We've got to break away from the fact that digital is not about technology. And organizations that are being successful in the world of digital are changing their customer and their patient models. They're changing their operating models. They're changing their business models. They're making it possible through technology enablement, but they're not leading it through technology only. And let's, and if you look at the spectrum of digital maturity that you have on the screen, being digital would mean that we've got this mindset. We operate in a completely different paradigm to where we were before. Organizations like that are being digital in their nature would be companies like Tesla, Google, Apple, etc. It is built into their DNA. On the far end of it, we've got companies that are exploring digital. They are looking at leveraging traditional technologies to automate existing capabilities. They're dabbling in digital. What they will do is they will celebrate little things, and ultimately the business needle doesn't move. In a recent survey that I conducted in South Africa, where we published the Digital Disruption Index, and it's available online, we saw many South African companies are at this point, they're doing digital. In other words, there's still a very heavy technology conversation. And ultimately, they're leveraging digital to extend their capabilities, but they still have the same business operating models and customer models. We've got to be careful that we don't confuse this for being digital. Again, the return on investment won't be there. Where we've got to get to as an interim step is to becoming digital. And in that instance, we are changing the customer and operating models. And I apologize with these hadi-das flying by right now. It's the 5 o'clock run in the afternoon. When we talk about becoming digital, this is where we start developing those unreasonable value propositions in our businesses. We change our current operating models and our customer models, and then we make it possible and sustainable through digital. And those companies we see are unlocking the higher returns of investment. If I reflect on healthcare, the triggers for the healthcare disruption is the sustainability of the costs, the rising costs of healthcare. It's not sustainable in the long term. We have patients that are becoming more informed. We're moving away from healthcare towards health consumerism, etc. And then you've got the exponential technology that's making this all possible. But of these three elements, you're looking at, if I take away healthcare terms, this is about costs and efficiencies, economic sustainability. The patient awakening is about patient experience and customer experience and patient and customer trust. And then the exponential technologies is what's making a lot of these shifts possible. Again, emphasizing the point, lead with the business imperative in mind, and then make it possible and sustainable through the digital technologies. I want you to reflect on this for a second. This is what I refer to as the digital pause, and it's based on an old historic observation, which was called the Engels pause. Now, the digital pause suggests a time frame between the introduction of a new exponential technology and the time to which the organization or the economy can benefit from that technology. That's the pause. Right. So in that pause, typically business performance drops because you got these new companies coming into the market. They're a little bit more efficient than you. Their value proposition is a little bit more disruptive and so on. And the incumbents tend to struggle, and I think most companies at the moment are certainly experiencing a certain amount of economic pressure. When we go into this digital pause, companies tend to, again, use their paradigm thinking to say, well, let's become more austere, cut costs, be careful in how we expand, maybe go back to our core business where we were comfortable, etc. And let's ride out this wave, this pause that we're in. Taking that kind of approach will make the pause a little bit more shallow, but it makes the pause more shallow, but it doesn't shorten the pause. And where we are at the moment is we've got to think about shortening the digital pause to remain competitive very quickly. You could replace, by the way, digital pause with COVID pause. The same principle applies. And so, yeah, it's to highlight that we've got to be careful that we're not suffering from a normalcy bias, where we think if we hold out long enough in the digital economy or the COVID economy, things will go back to normal and we'll recover. At best, you might recover, but you won't thrive in the new environment. And in actual fact, we've been talking about V-shaped recoveries, W-shaped recoveries, L-shaped recoveries, but ultimately we potentially are facing a K-shaped recovery. So organizations that properly transform in the digital economy, embrace digital, or in the COVID economy, will have a quicker recovery towards a thriving status, which is the top part of the K. Organizations that try and keep the old way of working into the future will typically have a slow decline, which is the bottom part of the K. So perhaps a thing to reflect on. So as leaders, leaders that have got to make decisions around organizations, understanding this technology is important, but we've got to balance foresight and perspective on the y-axis with execution and control on the x-axis. I think that's an important thing. So execution and control is the ability to make thinking real. Now, if we've got low foresight and low perspective, most people will call themselves firefighters. Things happen to them and they're constantly addressing a crisis. I call those individuals victims, because if you've got low foresight and low ability to execute, you're going to be in constant crisis mode. In this new environment, your relevance is going to be challenged, right? In instances where we've got a high level of foresight, we call those organizations or those leaders visionary. And I think that's very great. But if you've got low execution and control capabilities, we can't take that vision and make it real, then perhaps you're more of a person with a plan. Great thinker, but low execution capability. And that's also of very little value in this environment that we're in. Most organizations in the time zone that we're in are very strong execution and control entities. So we are very strong implementers. But the risk with being a very strong implementer, focusing on incremental improvements in our business, is that if we don't have foresight and control, if we're still happy with those 10-year views, I think there's a risk that we might be implementing the wrong things at the wrong costs. So we've got to make sure that while we are focused on execution in our business, that we're also developing a high level of view on foresight and how the markets are changing ahead of us. And that would mean being open to challenging our existing paradigms. And this is such an important thing. It's very easy to say, but a critical thing to embrace. It's organizational, industry, and leadership paradigms. We can't operate in the future against the same things that made us successful in the past. And I know it's a very generic comment to make, but even more now than ever before, we've got to be open to thinking about the business problems that we have differently, because your competitors, specifically in healthcare, aren't going to be other healthcare players. It's external players coming from financial services, from telco, from technology, etc., that are going to come and play in the space, because we own such large components of GDP. We are an attractive market for other players to come into. In this environment of controlling our destiny, we're exploring different business models, breaking away from the traditional construct. We're embracing new customer expectations, and we're certainly embracing new partnerships and ecosystems. And that would suggest that, and I'll touch on it maybe in the next slide, partnerships and ecosystems would be, don't worry if you don't have the skills inside your organization. I think the importance is to create an ecosystem where you're able to bring partners into your environment that benefit equally as you benefit from them by working together with them. And we're seeing an acceleration of R&D, we're seeing an acceleration of innovation and commercialization of new concepts between small businesses and large businesses by embracing that ecosystem construct. So a couple of principles to embrace. One is that we're living in the age of the ecosystem, and where we see it is that jobs are being disconnected from work and jobs have been disconnected from companies, and companies have become platforms. And that debate is done. We've all become platform businesses to some extent over the last 6 to 8 months. And some of the large organizations have been doing this successfully for a long time before COVID. My organization, as an example, locally, I work with small startups that help me address some of my capability gaps that I've got in exponential technology. So I don't have an augmented reality capability, but with the startups that I work with, they provide me with that capability, and I help them grow and commercialize their businesses by giving them access to market. So there's synergy. And there's, I mean, and this synergy works for large organizations. We've got to embrace more of that. Where we're seeing also the ecosystem construct play out is in terms of jobs. And I'm sure all of you are having conversations with your people as to when are you going to come back to the office. The bottom line is that now that, before COVID, people were curious about gig economy work. Post-COVID, people want gig economy work. Even though they're employed by a company, they want that flexibility of home or work. They don't want to go to the workplace to just work at a table and do the same things they could do at home. And so this mindset is also important to keep and attract skills into the organization. But most importantly, in this ecosystem construct is that we moved into a world, an ecosystem, or we've moved away from an era of me to an era of we. And so ecosystems and partnerships have become quite acceptable. During COVID, we saw companies from the same sectors coming together to fight a common enemy and to help one another. We've seen companies from different industries come together to solve similar problems. And the one that I really enjoyed following was the partnership between Kentucky Biotech, and British American Tobacco to use the tobacco plant as an expression medium for the development of a plant-based vaccine. So it says that, when we look at these partnerships, it's a very emotive thing. And our views, let's always stick to our core. We can't go into other industries, etc. That debate's out the window. If we can unlock success through these partnerships in a crisis, why don't we use it in the same to unlock the same kind of success we need in the digital economy? Lifelong learning, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is critical. Specifically, I'm talking to the leaders in the room. We think we've got to, we talk about not having skills in the business to take our companies into the digital economy. My challenge to you is, I think the biggest skills deficit we have is at the leadership level of organizations. So, and I'm not talking about coding and knowing how, the inner workings of artificial intelligence or 3D printing works. I'm talking about your digital fluency. If you don't have the digital fluency to navigate your business into this new digital economy, you becoming the liability for the organization and for the people that work for you. And there's a lot of studies coming out, and I'll touch on it if I've got time. I'll touch on it very quickly at the end. But the biggest concerns that CEOs have at the moment, 87% of CEOs are concerned that the leadership of their organization is not fluent enough to take the business into the future. So that's breaking away from existing paradigms, embracing new business models, understanding customer, and so on. And the one thing I just want to highlight is that our knowledge is decaying at about a rate of 30% a year in this current economy, which suggests that anything in your CV older than 4 years is irrelevant to your ability to get your next job. And I'm not talking about business wisdom and experience. I'm talking about technical knowledge. So we've got to constantly be refreshing ourselves in that regard. And there's definitely a move from deep technical capabilities to hybrid capabilities. We need doctors that understand artificial intelligence, architects that understand IoT, engineers that understand robotics. Those are the jobs that are in most demand at the moment around the world, and also growing from a value perspective. The final, I'm going to skip through this one. I think I touched on it briefly, but I want to just land on this point, and I see I've got just a minute or two left, is that from the other big challenge that we have, and Claudine has sort of alluded to that, is that we are exposed to so much technology at the moment, 3D printing, analytics, etc. Bottom left of the screen is 4D printing. We've got drone facilities. The center left of the screen is the distribution facilities at Alibaba. And when you look at that, you can actually see why they can compete globally. And so, they can keep their value proposition promises and do it very cheaply. As leaders, we're exposed to all these amazing technologies, and we need to decipher, which of these technologies add real value to our business versus which technologies are just really cool to have, like that self-solving Rubik's Cube. It's really nice, and it shows that the inventor's smart, but it adds no value to our business. And so we've got to be constantly, we've got to manage ourselves between that business imperative and the romance of this amazing technology. And so what I often leave behind with some of my the executives that I deal with is a very simple equation. It's not mathematically perfect, so don't fault me in this. But it basically says that before you make a decision into anything digital, you've got to consider this equation. Left side of the equation suggests that whatever you do, the capex of the machine needs to be cheaper than the opex of the human. And that would suggest that your digital environment needs to be cheaper than your previously, it needs to be more cost effective than your previous analog environment. You're not going to invest into new initiatives that are more expensive. It just doesn't make sense. But the most important one that I want to highlight is the right side of this equation, which says that before you invest into a digital opportunity to modernize your business, whichever part of the value chain you play in, you've got to make sure you can unlock one of the three digital dividends, one or more of the three digital dividends, and that's the G, the P, and the X. The G is exponential growth. Can I create new revenue in my business, or new impact if revenue is not my target, by leveraging these technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. The P is exponential productivity. Can I reduce the cost of doing business by leveraging these same technologies? And being the lowest cost producer in an industry is the winning strategy. Doesn't mean that you're the cheapest provider of products. It means that your costs are lower than your competitors. And if you've got that, you will always be the winner, all things being equal. And then the X is exponential experience. Can I use the same technology to provide an intuitive, friction-free, hassle-free experience for my customers? Because if you do that, they'll come back, stay longer, and then tell other people about it. And that's the last line of differentiation in highly commoditized markets. So with that, I'm going to pause there. Perhaps I'm just going to just jump in over here. I just wanted to, sorry, I remember I wanted to show this to you. This is a study that we did with executives. If you look at the top left-hand block, it says 87% of executives believe that digital will disrupt their industries if they do nothing. 11% of only 11% of them felt that the right skills in the business, and 92% of them felt that the operating models were wrong. Skills in the business is an easy thing to fix. You know, I've built a Deloitte digital practice, which is probably the most recognized practice on the continent at the moment, starting with a dozen individuals. But we can recruit, we can train, we can headhunt, etc., and attract those skills into the business. Operating model constructs is a leadership imperative. We can change our operating models of our business if we can justify it. The one that it's most difficult, I think, to address is the bottom middle block, which says that 87% of those executives didn't believe that the right leaders in their business with the right fluency to take the business into the future. And that's one of the areas we need to certainly focus on. So as I wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Your digital transformation, irrespective of the industry that you're in, has to be business-led. It's got to be based on think of digital transformation or digital strategy as your corporate strategy for the digital economy. That's what it is. It's not about your marketing or your channels, etc. It's your corporate strategy for the digital economy. It's going to be enabled and fueled by the leadership and organizational behaviors. That's critical. If you've got the best strategy and you don't have leadership and organizational buy-in into it, you're going to go nowhere. And then finally, it will be enabled by technology. It's not led by technology. So with that, Kendra, I'm going to pause there and then hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Walter, for those insights. I wasn't quite sure if the Hardy-Dars were agreeing with you or disagreeing with you.
They get
and
loud
thank
at times,
you.
I apologize.
Yeah, as I said, I wasn't quite sure if they were just trying to drown you out because they didn't believe in what you were saying, or if it was sort of a round of applause from their side. And there they are again. And thank you also for sharing your contact details. We do promise not to spam you unless it's to get a copy of your presentation. We would really love to share it on our platform. So please do send it through to us.
No problem.
You are definitely right about the progression of digital. We keep talking about the future, but the reality is that a lot of these future trends are already being widely practiced. And I also appreciated your point about it's about the mindset, and you actually need to start with the problem and not the technology first. I think that was very important. Just a reminder that these sessions are being recorded, so they will be put up on our site the following day, tomorrow. So everybody does have an opportunity to listen again later and just go through the information yourself in case you missed anything. We have a few minutes left now for some discussions, which I will open to the floor. If anybody has any Q&As, I would just ask that they put them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We only have a few minutes left though, so if there's anything that we don't get to, don't worry, you can still send it to us and we will send them to the speakers and have them answered at a later stage. I do have one question from my side, though, that I would appreciate, I think, both of your takes, Claudina and Walter, on this. This is just around innovation and the climate of innovation in South Africa today. How do you think government is adapting regulations in response to innovation? Do you think that there is an environment for innovation being created in the country today? I think, Claudina, maybe perhaps we can start with you, since this is very directly with what you deal with on a daily basis.
Luckily, we're not responsible for regulations. So I think in the health environment, the main one is actually South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. And I think they've been fairly responsive. If you look at they're fairly new in the way that they are doing business now and how they were able to do certain things around COVID. Nothing is still perfect, but I think there was quite a lot of progress in that environment, and they're open for discussions. And when we've got problems, we can actually go and discuss it with them. And I think that, yeah, we're trying our best to see how can you adapt around a regulation. Yeah.
And Walter, your take on the climate?
Look, so if I take, start with, is there a drive around innovation and digitization? I think there's certainly an intent. We've seen that special commission being created to look at the digitization of our economy. And I do know that there's a number of things happening in the background. So there's two levels. One is at a national level, there's certainly an intent to do that. We've got to, I think, look at the critical things that have to be unlocked in order to make it possible. We focus a lot on making spectrum available, reducing the cost of data, etc. I don't think those are the critical things. There's important things, but not the things that certainly will unlock innovation. We're seeing a lot of support towards, or talking towards establishing ecosystems for startups and innovation and so on. I think we certainly need to do more, a lot more around that. And then if we go down to various sectors, I think some sectors are more progressive than others. Financial services, I think, is a lot more, from a regulatory perspective, is probably a lot more progressive than healthcare from a regulatory perspective. And what I've seen in financial services is the regulators coming together with companies and creating sandboxes to co-experiment and do things together. So let's not run away from the blockchain. Let's embrace the blockchain together and understand what cryptocurrencies mean. And, and if we do it together, we understand the upsides and the potential risks, and we manage both. And so I would certainly encourage that to happen in all the sectors. When it comes to things like entrepreneurship and startups, it's quite an interesting one. Entrepreneurs would say that there isn't enough investment for them. But if I talk to venture capital companies, they'll say to me, well, there isn't enough entrepreneurs to invest into, which is quite an interesting thing. And so what we need to fill a gap, there's probably a little bit more, not more involvement, but I think enhanced involvement from the universities. I think they're a great source of new IP and interesting IP that can be commercialized. And perhaps a segue that helps entrepreneurs with really good early stage ideas towards something that's more sustainable. The nature of our investment into innovative things is that we like to balance risks. So we want something a little bit more certain before we invest. But there's that segue between concept and there's a lot of concept, and to make that concept real and workable, there's a bit of a gap, and perhaps that's the gap that we could work on. But again, it's not one initiative that makes it happen. I think it's going to be a lot of things, an ecosystem that has to be created to make all of this happen. So that's I think we can always do more to drive innovation and digitization in the economy. And again, it comes down to it's about survival. We can't just be focused on how do we compete with our local parties, our local competitors. My view has always been that we've got to remain globally competitive. We can't just look at our local dynamics.
Thank you. I'm definitely interested in both of your opinions, because obviously at Westgrow, one of our functions is to try and enhance the health technology ecosystem in South Africa. So any tips and advice that we have about how to do that and how it can function better is always appreciated. We are going slightly over time, but I just thought we can take a second just to answer one additional question, I think, from the audience, which was, how do you suggest companies move the top layer if they're not right to take the business forward? So I think that's supposed to be remove the top layer if they're not right to take the business forward.
Yes.
Well, so I think that's for you.
Yeah, look, that's very aggressive, removing top layers. Look, what has to happen? I think there has to be a landing point. First of all, what happens is that there's got to be an intent to move the organization forward. You know, we need to modernize. And again, let's take the conversation digitization out. We've either got to increase our ability to generate additional revenue, reduce costs, or change that customer experience. If we can't pull those levers, we don't have a value proposition in the market. Our value proposition will erode over time. And so the critical thing is to put that imperative forward to the leadership of a company. This is what we need to be done, you know, that needs to happen, or, you know, one of those. And the reality is that the only way to do that in a competitive way in the current environment is by leveraging digital technologies and digital fluency. So what needs to happen is, if it's a CEO that's driving it or the board that's driving it down, I would encourage, that's a better word, that we increase the digital fluency of the executive. First of all, they need to wake up to the fact that this is not a technology conversation. So what happens in many instances has been relegated to the technology department to go and solve this problem, but it's a business thing that has to change. It's a business challenge. Technology is the enablement, but it wasn't the technologist it's not technologists that are inventing these great solutions that are causing companies to be disruptive. It is the business idea that gets created, that is created without that paradigm thinking, which then is made possible by the technology. So what we need to do is focus on lifting the digital fluency of our executives. And it's not just one event. It's a sequence of events, or think of it as a curriculum over a period of time, where we help them think about the dynamics of the business models, the dynamics on the operating model of the business. What does it mean for our people? And then understand the business attributes of these various technologies. You don't need to be a coder of AI or to understand how to wire the IoT devices up. You need to understand what's the business attributes of those devices. How could they be used to create commercial value? And that's where I would start. And I've seen organizations where once the CEO buys into it, it becomes a non-discretionary thing for the rest of the executive and senior management to become digitally fluent and to start embracing, showing evidence of digital thinking inside their business. So I think the key thing there is to take away the fact that it's a technology conversation. It's a business conversation, understanding the positive attributes of technology to enhance the business thinking.
Very good thoughts. Thank you. And then I think just your closing thoughts from both of you on what do you think the timeline is for consumers to understand and drive implementation of new technology and innovation? That was our last question from the audience. And I just thought maybe we could just close off on that. Claudina, I don't know if you want to start.
One of the most important things is you need to take your end user or consumer with you on the journey of developing those technologies. Otherwise, when you sort of do not have them as part of the development process, first of all, how are you going to ensure that your end user experience is actually what they are looking for or are addressing their needs? But also you will be far more hard up to have to sell this total disruptive technology in a number of cases to them. So it will be far more a harder sell. So the best is just to bring them along as you keep them informed, get their advice, get their opinions, but keep them informed of what's happening.
So if I can maybe add to that, in addition to what Claudina said, I think it's the adoption rates. I mean, it would be, all I can say around the adoption rates is that what we thought would take a certain amount of time has been reduced dramatically, specifically not just because of the digital economy, but because of what we've been through in the last 8 months. So there's a lot of evidence that digital adoption has moved into the baby boomer generation, and we're seeing a lot of adoption in that environment. So they've been forced to use the platforms, and the platforms are incredibly intuitive, and they've used it. And again, where there's an economic benefit, like some of the health insurers that track your activity levels to give you a benefit on what you pay on a monthly basis, people tend to adopt that as well. So a couple of things: the environment we're in has driven adoption. If there's an economic incentive, that drives adoption. And then if we embrace things with that client experience or the patient experience in mind, so that the adoption is intuitive, friction-free, easy to understand, that drives adoption as well. So patients, I think we'll see, and that's why I said at the beginning, quick isn't quick enough. We're seeing a reduction in time to market on certain initiatives, coming down right down to dropping by 50%, in some instances, dropping by 80%. Around adoption, and so I think it's a combination of constantly retesting the market, reassessing the market, and us playing a role in driving that adoption as well. As soon as products are available, and the product is well designed and well curated, that in itself could accelerate adoption. Don't wait for your competitors to do it.
Thank you for that advice. And that is unfortunately all we have time for today. We have gone slightly over, and I'm cognizant of that. But I would just like to say a big thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate the time that you took to join us today. And for everybody else, thank you for attending this Cape Health Tech Week session. We hope that you have found the information useful. And if there are any ideas for content that you think that we should be including in future Cape Health Tech Weeks, please feel free to send it to us. And until then, thank you, goodbye, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Take care.
Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. Massive round of applause.
Done.
To both of you. Well done, Kendra. That was a very
All
nice...
of us. Ray and welcome, and yeah. Alma, you, Jacinta. We did it.
No more Cape Health, ever. Ever. Never, ever.
So Walter's a very, very, very cool speaker. I can see why he's, people get so excited about him.
He is. He's got so much understanding and information, and the stuff that he does, it just puts people's minds to saying, I thought this world was exciting, but it's way more bigger than what I thought health or tech would be. So obviously some countries are moving far ahead of us, but it's good to understand that it's your business that also needs to change in order if you're going to stay competitive in this world. So it's not just about having cool innovations. You need to also think about your business along the innovation lines. So
yeah, a lot of the points he was making just about business, running a business in general were so, on point. Yeah, so I'll definitely reach out and, accept that LinkedIn request and, become besties with him just so we can keep him in the loop, for future Cape Health Tech Weeks.
And ask if you can help feed his Adidas there in the background. What?
I was wondering if he was in Joburg, because that's somewhere like a Joburg thing usually. Like, I think having the Adidas
there's some areas in Cape Town that has a specific